Hi, I am Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NVLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoy today's episodes. I also want to mention to you that I just launched my podcast swag on Wednesday of this week and have a page for it on my website, and I will also send you the link to it in the podcast description, and I will also send it to you in the newsletter that I usually send out on Fridays. I am now selling t-shirts, water bottles, and a backpack, and they all have the podcast logo and title on it and the tagline. So I am looking forward to watching the sales and seeing who buys them, and spreading the word more about my podcast. Also, another announcement that I have to make is I recently created another podcast called Sleepy Butterfly for people who have challenges with sleeping at night or meditating, and it's geared towards people who are auditorily sensitive or have chronic migraines, and being able to have nice relaxing nature sounds for them to fall asleep to or to meditate to and be able to be refreshed the next day or when they come out of their meditation. So some of the sounds are like chimes or nature sounds like water or rainforest. And again, it's called Sleepy Butterfly. It is on Spotify and also Apple Podcast and Google Podcast. And it's on everywhere else where you can get podcasts as well. So I hope you are able to get some benefits out of that one also. The next group chat for people with NLD or other learning challenges will be on June 18th at 10 a.m. Pacific time zone. And for those of you who haven't been to a group before, it's just a safe place for you to talk about some challenges you may have with your learning challenge, and to be able to feel like you can vent if you need to others who know what it's like to be neurodiverse and not neurotypical. Yeah, you know, I'm lucky like you that my family, even though my parents are, you know, opposites from each other, they can attract. They help me a lot with NLD. Like I remember one time my dad was using a hand signal that I didn't know what meant. I just had to say to him very clearly, I don't know what you're saying. He was like, oh, you know, face palm moment there. And then he started using words with his hands the next time. And I was like, okay, now this works.
Those are some of my conversations with my husband. I'm like, oh yeah, NLD, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, yeah, I can get where sometimes they don't understand the little tiny bits of it because, sometimes they forget a little bit or just don't think about it in the moment. Um,
Mhm.
but for the most part, I think I've been, I guess you could say, lucky for having friends who do understand it. And um, definitely the podcast helps
Yeah.
because then they
I've
can.
had, uh, I've had friends recently be like, oh, like one friend even said, I don't think I've been, how'd you put, she goes, I don't think I've been enough of an ally. She goes, I want to be a better one, like reading
Mm,
and starting. Not that that friend was ever somebody that I felt wasn't hearing it when I was speaking to her about it, but she understood it in a way that she never had before.
mm,
As she was reading my blogs. I mean, I wouldn't just walk up to her and be like, well, this is exactly how it affects my life, but she kind of got it more. And it felt so good to have a friend be like, I think I've not been as supportive, as I should be. I want to be more of an ally as somebody who, you know, a neurotypical person to their friends who are, neurodivergent. And that was kind of like an amazing moment. And I was like, yep, this is all worth it. Like it's working. It's what I've always wanted to do. I wanted to, educate people. So not just so they're more supportive of me, but so they might be supportive of their coworker in the next cubicle or their child that they haven't had yet, that might have, NLD or something similar. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud that I've, even in a small way since July, been able to actually make some differences. I mean, I had one NLD reader who said that this person was feeling so inspired by reading a few of my blogs from where he found it online that he was starting to think about doing some writing on it himself.
yeah.
So it just kind of really feels good to be part of just helping others feel more comfortable in their own skin,
Yeah,
feel
it
more
does.
the path through their own lives.
Yeah, I agree with you because some of the feedback I've gotten with my podcast, where um, some people have shared that some of the interviews have helped them be um, more, what was it? Oh, it was that they want to be more open with their family about
Mhm.
NLP. And that made me feel really good because I I know that when you have support from your family, that usually helps you more in life
Mhm.
because I have it, and because I remember, like your friend mentioned, when after she read your blog, um, I remember asking one of my friends about some of my social challenges I was working on because I was feeling like I wasn't getting anywhere on them. And she actually
Mhm.
said I was improving on them. And she noticed that after I was diagnosed with NLD, that I started asking more questions about her life.
Oh
And I was
yeah.
like, oh, okay. That made me feel good because,
Mhm.
um, and she said it in a good way that she was like, not to make you feel bad that you didn't do that beforehand, but
Mhm.
that it was just something different. Um,
Cool.
so, like, I obviously became more aware of the other person in the conversation and try to be more, you know, more two-way conversation than just one way
Mhm.
with my friends. Um, so this is something I try to talk about in the podcast to make it be positive. Do you know if you have any strengths that come from your learning challenges?
Mhm. So I definitely think verbal skills in general is a strength that comes from it. So one thing I've noticed is sometimes I'm able to explain things in a way that other people can't. So people say, "Oh, you really," I mean, I had an editor once, it's like, "I really love the way you explain things in your
Mm,
article about a magician." And he just loved the way I described the show and the way the magician was doing what he was doing. And it's because I have to think of everything in words. So
Mhm.
understand something if I don't have the words for them. So even if something's hard to describe in words, I have to do that anyway. So I'm able to communicate things in ways other people can't. I actually, as a newspaper reporter, I felt I really had a strength in hearing something from my source and translating it to the average person.
Huh.
Um, and I think that was probably a verbal strength as well.
Mhm.
In my own specific testing, going back to eighth grade, which is one of my favorite reports, because in addition to the actual NLD diagnosis one, my eighth grade report really, I mean, I don't know why I wasn't diagnosed with it then, because it just really spelled everything out really well. It talked about how I had this very like high level of, and I forget the exact words. I actually should have looked up the paperwork so I could have used the exact terminology, but um, kind of a social emotional awareness.
Mhm.
So I've used that and to be a good newspaper reporter. So I definitely use that because one of the things that my sources really liked was because I really heard them and I presented their articles really well. So sometimes people will read an article that's written about them and like, well, that doesn't really get my business. That doesn't really get my policies if it was a politician, but people would often say, you really got where I was coming from, where, my story. And then when I worked in supported employment, so what that job is you work in a community mental health center. Everyone who's a client of a community mental health center has a diagnosis of a severe mental illness. So I would really kind of sit with my clients, get to know them. It was my job to help them with every aspect of getting and retaining employment, but the majority of clients are looking for work.
Mm.
Um, and one time I was in a staff meeting and one of my coworkers um, called me, like they told me that I was doing miracles with my clients. So I wasn't just getting my clients. That's actually the word they use. The group had a really good sense of humor, but um, I was talking about the latest job I was helping my clients get. And they're like, wow, you don't just get them jobs, you help them get their dream jobs.
Wow.
Like one of my other coworkers, like it's all about the miracles with you. And I'm like, yes, that's what I do. But it's because I really could kind of talk with my clients, hear them. I've had people, not to compare myself to Barbara Walters because she's at a different level, but I've had people actually compare the way I talk and communicate to someone like Barbara Walters as a disarming person. I've heard that from my newspaper reporting as well as working with clients in support employment. So I feel like I've used those kind of verbal skills and those kind of people understanding skills is really kind of what it is. So I still definitely feel like I have some ways that my LD affects me socially that I've worked through. But in addition to that, I feel like I understand people kind of in a really good way that's kind of helped me along the way. Um, and I don't know, I guess, I mean, also just kind of learning to manage having a learning disability throughout my life and coming up against kind of I'm trying to think of a better way to say it, roadblocks, but I'll just kind of say that and find creative ways around them. So I've
Mhm.
given up on a certain skill here or there in my life, but I've never given up on what I was trying to achieve. So I've done a lot of things in my life by being creative and find a different way to accomplish something. So because I've learned to look at problems in a kind of a creative way, I can apply that to other things that I'm trying to succeed in my life. So I've applied that, professionally by doing things in creative ways with my clients, finding different ways to connect them with jobs. Um, so there's to me, I feel like there's a lot of talents that come with it, and there's a lot of things about it that's kind of part of also why I have that kind of identity mindset, that there's a lot of things that I think would be different if I didn't have an NVLD brain that I love about myself and I'm glad that I bring to the table.
Yeah, I would agree with you. There are definitely talents with NVLD where I would say the verbal is also for me because um, I think with the testing, I got like the 99th percentile with the audio memory.
Mhm.
And when I saw that, I was like, okay, that's really high.
Right. Yeah.
And I was, trying to understand that. And I think sometimes I still am like, okay, why is it that high? But I know that when I am listening to music or other things that are audio like TV, I can recall them really well. Like when my mom and my family were watching something on TV, she'll ask me if we've seen it before because she knows I have pretty good audio memory. And
Yeah.
usually I can tell if we've seen it before. Sometimes there are times where it takes me a little bit longer. But other than audio, I think some of the things would be with the details where I may notice something that somebody wouldn't see.
Yeah.
Like, I was noticing with work one day where I was editing something, and I was noticing that the time of the day on this service on it was wrong, because my mom used to do her service at 9 and 11 in the morning, but now she only does it at 10. So I wanted to change it, because if people were going to look at that, it was going to be wrong.
Yeah.
So, that little thing there that somebody may overlook because it's not the big picture, it's a
Yep.
small detail.
Yeah.
So that's an example. And another thing that I think I'm actually, I don't know why I'm good at cooking. Maybe it's because my mom is good at it. And she helped me get better at it. I know that some of the fine motor things are challenging for me too, like with cutting and preparing things, like you were saying earlier in the interview. But I think I've worked on those challenges to make them easier. And I know that's one of my gifts, is that I don't give up easily. So
Yeah.
I'm determined to make something easier for me once I know it's a challenge,
Yeah.
which is a good thing, because then I try to make my life easier. And I've definitely done that with the challenges that are most difficult for me, especially math. Like, for some reason, not the math that has formulas in it, those I don't really use anymore, but like the basic mental math, I got better at that from my tutors that helped me, and whatever they taught me stuck. And now I'm able to do it, probably not as fast as a neurotypical would, but faster than I used to. And I I don't seem to need a calculator anymore to check my work, which is, a good feeling.
Yeah. Good work.
Thanks. So, I mean, I have some days when it's a little slow, and that's probably when I have a bad migraine, but it's because there's something else making my head hurt. But not as many days as there used to be. And the next question that I was going to ask you, because you were kind of saying earlier in the view that you said there were some things you wish could disappear with NLD. This is kind of similar to that, where if there was anything you wish the world would know more about NLD or other learning challenges.
Kind of the big broad answer is I wish people understood that it existed. And to kind of and to go back back on that, it's just like I've often felt that my specific challenges or the specific challenges of NLD are so unknown. So just the fact that it even exists, but also I remember trying to explain it to a friend who was a roommate, and this was like a time period where there was misunderstanding coming between us and everything about it. And I really kind of explained all the ways it affected my life. And he goes, whoa, he goes, that really would affect your, a person's life. I'm like, yeah.
Ah.
Like, do you understand now? He's like, yeah. And I think that really helped, because at first he thought, there were certain things that I was doing that were because I didn't care or because of this thing. No, I actually spent a lot of time thinking about how to put the, pots back on the wall that you created, or, whatever it was. But this is why it's affecting my life. So I kind of wish more people knew about it, because even before I was, doing these purposeful things, like writing a blog or, volunteering with an organization to advocate for it, I would have to advocate for it very frequently, and in a way that wasn't just, oh, I have this, you probably know a little bit about it, so here's the other things that I could tell you about me. It was like, I have this, you've never heard of it, it's going to take me kind of a while to explain it to you, you're going to be confused about it because it's so different than you've probably heard before. So I wish that more people were aware of it, so each of us didn't have to kind of have to be the full teacher for it to the people in our lives. So there's a little bit more information.
Mhm.
But overall, I guess it's kind of just to know that it is different than other things. So, if I'm trying to organize in piles, which is something that I do kind of, I don't organize very well, that might be different than a friend who does the same thing because of ADHD. So I might do it because I don't have the visual skills to figure out how things go together. And so I might need support for that in a different way, or understanding about it in a different way. So those are kind of the big things. Or I guess another big thing is, just because I'm so articulate doesn't mean the things I'm struggling with aren't real. And that's a whole nother thing too, like just people just not believing it because of the way my skills present.
You hit the nail on the head with the articulate piece there.
Yep.
I agree with you with the understanding piece, because it's one of the learning disabilities that's not on the DSM, and there might be
Mhm.
other ones that aren't on there too. And I know it's not, or used to be on there, but it was taken off because I think it was taken off because there's really no one definition for NLD. And also there's two acronyms like NLD and VLD. Make up your
Yeah.
mind.
I know. I always said NLD. I'm like trying to say NVLD so it doesn't get confusing when I do something for the NVLD project. So I'm like, learn. Put the in.
Right. I'm like, I like NVLD a little bit better because it has the V for the verbal in there, personally.
An important part.
Yeah. But I would agree with you that I wish people understood it a little bit better, that it is an actual thing, that we're not making it up.
Yeah. Oh, that's the hugest thing. I've definitely said that exact sentence before.
Yeah.
I'm not making it up. I even felt that way when I got my diagnosis. I'm like, wait, all those things are part of my diagnosis. I wasn't making all those up.
It's real?
Like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's an academic thing. I'm like, oh, that part of my life. Oh, it was such a great feeling.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I felt really good when I got my diagnosis too. It was a huge relief. It was like, ding, light bulb went off. Because now I understood myself more, because I knew why so many things were challenging. And that happened for my family too, because they were like, oh, this is why Jennifer has so many challenges with things. So they were like, okay, now we know why. Now we can start trying to figure out how to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that has happened for other people too. And, you know, if NLD was on the DSM, and I know the NVLD project is working on that, which I'm glad they
Mhm.
are,
Yeah.
that it would be easier for people to know what exactly it is,
Mhm.
and to have people who are still in the academic life get accommodations, because I know that I was lucky to get accommodations, but also to have them be not challenged. Like some
Mhm.
people have that in college,
Yeah.
and maybe that's because I was in sociology. I don't know.
Yeah.
um,
So maybe like just being in your subject matter, people are more open to that. Or,
yeah.
Mhm.
And my minor was environmental science, so
Mhm.
maybe just where I was helped out with that. I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
sure.
Um, but I would agree, you know, getting more advocacy from the public world would
Mhm.
help, because then the individuals who do the advocacy would feel more recognized, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I also follow, advocates in the autism community and ADHD community, and they already kind of have they're already jumping off a standpoint of people understanding what those things are,
Mhm.
understanding the full story that they're educating about, but they at least have people, coming to them with running knowledge. Whereas like the first thing that I get when I speak up about it is, what is that? So I
Right.
would have to be the first person to ever teach somebody about what I'm experiencing.
Yeah, I agree with you too, where I know with probably all my friends in college, I would have to tell them what it was if I was willing to tell them what it was.
Yeah.
And, you know, I didn't tell all of them, but I think I told the ones that I was closer to. And
Hmm.
I know uh, that helped once they knew what it was and understood, also because it actually made the relationship closer usually. Um, and
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, and you know, it it did take a long time to describe, because it's so intricate and different for everybody.
Yeah. And that could be the hard thing too. I'd be like, but don't, if you meet somebody else and say they have it, don't necessarily think they're exactly like me, you know,
Right.
because that I'd feel bad if that you know what I mean? That person had all these assumptions on them. So that's kind of one of the really important things too, is it can be so different for an individual, and it can manifest differently. So I'll look at something, I'll be like, I definitely had that challenge because of this part of my NLD. And then somebody else will say, well, I also have that specific weakness with my NLD, but I don't have that same challenge. So it can kind of be different that much significantly from person to person, that
Right.
that also is very confusing as well for probably all of us. I mean, us with it as well as other people, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree with you. The way I kind of have tried to describe it is, it's kind of like autism, where it has its own spectrum of people experience the challenges and symptoms to a different degree.
Mhm.
And I've noticed that because when I've talked to people about the challenges, is that they have a different levels with them than I do. Like the fine motor skills is one of them, because for some reason I can knit, which is kind of interesting because the needles can be really big or really small.
Mhm.
And yes, the smaller ones are harder for me to use, but if I keep at it, I can do it. It's like, okay, how can I do that if I have NLD?
Yeah.
No. Um,
Yeah.
so maybe my determination helps me with that.
Yeah.
um, but you know, like with the driving, like I said earlier, some people have the visual spatial to such a bad degree that they can't drive.
Mhm.
Even if they've tried to, they just realize that it's too hard. Um,
Mhm.
and I know that that's challenging because it's one of the ways that you can get around a lot more easily.
Yeah. I grew up in a very rural area, more rural than where I live now. Like I can walk downtown now. I could
Hmm.
manage without having a car now. But when I was a teenager and a young in my 20s, I don't know how I could have lived if I didn't learn how to drive. So I was just very determined with that one to really make it work. And then when I worked in community mental health, you had to spend 80% of your week in the community driving to meet your clients at libraries and cafes, sometimes at their job sites. So I'm really glad that even though I did move to a more populated area, I'm really glad I did learn how to drive because that job would not have been an option for me if that was a skill I didn't develop. It's nice my clients, like you actually would drive your clients to places sometimes. So I would have this person that I was serving, in my car,
Hmm.
get to the point of being a strong enough driver to kind of have that responsibility. That kind of, I guess the driving is kind of like your knitting to kind of like really work through that challenge that um I never considered not be able to do it, but maybe somebody else with a different mindset might have thought they would never have learned to drive with where my skills were. And that's not to say that another person who never learns how to drive just didn't work as hard as I did. Their skills might have been different than mine, but that's definitely kind of how I do see that for myself, that was the determination of I really need to drive to get around where I am.
Right. I would agree with you with the driving too, because I live in Southern California and there's not very good public transportation. So I kind of have to learn how to drive.
Mhm.
And I've, um, so I kind of thinking, okay, I have to become better at it because of that. And I also had the two jobs, well, not the two jobs, but the second job that I had with people with autism. Um, sometimes I would drive the clients around in my car.
Mhm.
So like you with your clients, I had to be thinking, okay, I'm gonna have somebody else in my car. I'm gonna be more aware of my surroundings there because it's not just me; it's somebody else now. That is with me.
Yeah.
So I can relate to that as well. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than it originally was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.